The interview was supposed to focus on Ronaldo's upcoming charity foundation launch and his latest endorsement deals, a routine promotional session scheduled for 30 minutes in a London television studio, where he expected to field predictable questions about athletic performance, family life, and philanthropic initiatives that generated positive publicity while avoiding controversial topics that could complicate his commercial relationships or create unnecessary political complications. But when the interviewer shifted unexpectedly to questions about his recent refusal to participate in Israeli cultural events and his position on Middle Eastern politics, Ronaldo realized that this seemingly innocent promotional interview had been designed as an ambush, intended to force him into defending positions that he had carefully articulated in previous statements, rather than allowing him to focus on the charitable work and business ventures that were supposed to be the session's primary subjects. The interviewer was a seasoned journalist whose career had been built on asking difficult questions that created compelling television moments, and his approach to the Israel topic revealed his intention to generate controversy rather than illuminate understanding. Beginning with loaded questions that assumed Ronaldo's criticism of Israeli policies was motivated by anti-Semitism or ignorance about Middle Eastern complexity, rather than genuine concern for human rights and civilian casualties that had been documented by international organizations whose credibility was beyond dispute. And when Ronaldo attempted to redirect the conversation to the foundation work that was supposed to be the interview's focus, the journalist persisted with increasingly aggressive questions that seemed designed to trap him into saying something that could be taken out of context or used to discredit his previous statements about Palestinian rights. The first sign that this interview was following a predetermined script came when the journalist presented a series of sponsorship offers from Israeli companies that Ronaldo had allegedly rejected, documents that had not been publicly available and whose presentation suggested coordination with business interests that wanted to pressure him into reconsidering his position on normalization activities. And when the journalist demanded explanations for why Ronaldo was willing to work with companies from countries with poor human rights records while refusing partnerships with Israeli businesses, his questions revealed either ignorance about the specific circumstances of Israeli occupation policies or deliberate misrepresentation of the moral distinctions that separated routine commercial relationships from partnerships that could be interpreted as endorsement of systematic oppression and violation of international law. Ronaldo's initial attempts to explain his position were repeatedly interrupted by the journalist, who seemed more interested in creating confrontational television than understanding the principles that guided decisions about which business relationships were compatible with stated commitments to human rights and social justice. And when the interviewer suggested that Ronaldo's position was hypocritical because he had not similarly rejected partnerships with companies from other countries whose governments had been criticized for human rights violations, his question revealed the kind of false equivalency that treated all human rights concerns as equally serious, regardless of their scope, systematic nature, or international legal status, that distinguished occupation and settlement activities from other types of policy disputes. The breaking point came when the journalist read from prepared notes about Israeli technological innovations and cultural contributions, suggesting that Ronaldo's refusal to engage with Israeli institutions represented ingratitude for advances in medical technology, agricultural science, and digital communications that had benefited people around the world, including Palestinians, who had access to Israeli innovations despite political conflicts that affected other aspects of their relationship with Israeli society. And this argument revealed the interviewer's fundamental misunderstanding of the distinction between acknowledging technological achievements and endorsing political policies that violated international law and created systematic oppression that affected millions of people whose rights deserved protection, regardless of their government's technological capabilities. "This is not what we agreed to discuss," Ronaldo said firmly, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had been deceived about the interview's purpose. and was not willing to participate in what had become a political interrogation disguised as entertainment journalism. I came here to talk about charitable work and business ventures, not to be lectured about Israeli technology or questioned about decisions I have already explained clearly in previous statements that address these issues with the seriousness they deserve, rather than treating them as opportunities for television drama that serves no constructive purpose. The journalist's response revealed his determination to continue the confrontational approach, regardless of Ronaldo's obvious discomfort and repeated attempts to redirect the conversation, insisting that public figures had obligations to explain their political positions when those positions affected business relationships and international diplomacy, and suggesting that Ronaldo's refusal to engage with these questions demonstrated either ignorance about complex geopolitical issues or unwillingness to defend positions that might be difficult to justify when subjected to serious scrutiny from people who understood the full context of Middle Eastern politics and conflict resolution efforts. The moment that defined the interview came when the journalist suggested that Ronaldo's support for Palestinian rights was influenced by his Muslim teammates and advisors who had radicalized his political thinking, an accusation that revealed both the interviewer's prejudice about Islamic influence on political decision-making and his assumption that Ronaldo's humanitarian concerns could only be explained through external manipulation rather than personal moral development that had led him to principled positions about human rights and international law that were consistent with values he had expressed throughout his career when discussing social justice and equality. "That's enough," Ronaldo said, standing up from his chair and beginning to remove his microphone. "You clearly have no interest in the topics we agreed to discuss, and I will not sit here while you make racist assumptions about my advisors or suggest that my concern for Palestinian children requires explanation beyond basic human decency that should motivate anyone who sees images of civilian casualties and systematic oppression that violates international law, regardless of which government implements such policies or what justifications they offer for actions that harm innocent people." The producer's frantic signals from behind the cameras revealed the production team's panic about losing their high-profile guest in the middle of a live broadcast. But Ronaldo was unmoved by their concerns about television ratings or advertising commitments that had apparently motivated the decision to ambush him with political questions, rather than conducting the charitable foundation interview that had been arranged through his management team. And his departure from the studio was captured by cameras that continued rolling as he walked out, while the journalist attempted to salvage the situation by addressing viewers directly about what he characterized as Ronaldo's unwillingness to defend controversial political positions. The footage of Ronaldo's walkout was immediately circulated on social media platforms, where it generated millions of views and widespread discussion about the ethics of ambush journalism, the responsibilities of public figures to engage with political topics, and the broader question of whether athletes and entertainers should be expected to serve as political commentators, simply because their fame gave their opinions greater visibility than those of ordinary citizens who might be equally informed about international affairs, but lacked platforms that could amplify their voices to global audiences. And the overwhelming response supported Ronaldo's decision to refuse participation in what many viewers recognized as a setup designed to create controversy rather than genuine dialogue about important issues. The legal action that followed was initiated by Ronaldo's team, who argued that the interviewer and television network had violated agreements about the interview's scope and purpose, essentially committing fraud by advertising a charitable foundation discussion while conducting a political interrogation that could have damaged his reputation and business relationships if he had not been experienced enough to recognize and respond appropriately to the deceptive tactics that were being employed to manipulate him into making statements that could be used against him in future commercial or political contexts. And the lawsuit sought both financial compensation and policy changes that would prevent similar deceptions in future interviews with public figures who agreed to promotional appearances based on specific understandings about topics and approaches. The broader impact of the incident extended beyond Ronaldo's personal experience to influence how other celebrities and athletes approached media interviews, with many public figures becoming more cautious about agreeing to promotional appearances without detailed written agreements about topics, questions, and editorial control that could prevent journalists from using interview opportunities to pursue personal or political agendas, rather than serving the informational purposes that were supposed to justify celebrities' time in media companies. Access to high-profile guests whose participation attracted audiences and advertising revenue that funded journalistic operations. The foundation launch that had been intended as the interview's focus proceeded successfully despite the controversy, with Ronaldo's refusal to be manipulated by deceptive journalism actually generating more positive attention for his charitable work than a routine promotional interview might have achieved. And the incident demonstrated that maintaining integrity and refusing to participate in unethical media practices could sometimes produce better outcomes than accommodating journalistic misconduct in hopes of avoiding confrontation that might generate negative publicity in the short term, but could damage credibility and moral authority over longer periods. Years later, when other public figures had followed Ronaldo's example by walking out of interviews that violated agreed-upon parameters, when media organizations had implemented clearer guidelines about informed consent and topic boundaries for celebrity interviews, when the incident had become a case study in journalism ethics courses about the responsibilities that came with access to influential public figures, Ronaldo would reflect that leaving the London studio had been one of the easiest decisions of his career, because it represented a choice between personal integrity and public relations convenience, between defending principles that mattered more than temporary embarrassment and participating in media manipulation that treated serious political issues as entertainment opportunities that served commercial interests rather than public understanding of complex international problems that deserved thoughtful analysis, rather than sensationalized confrontation designed to generate ratings rather than insight.